Good evening, everybody. Today is Wednesday, June 30th, 2021. I'm Bill Woodcock, live from Four Seasons Total Landscaping in Philadelphia, and you are watching or listening to another edition of Forward Maryland. Jason Booms is continuing his hiatus from our fine podcast production. But I do have a special guest host coming to you also live, but this one from some hovering in some bubble above the San Francisco Bay. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the podcast, a former guest and now standing in co-host, Steve Hunt. Steve, welcome.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for having me. Good to be here. I am here live, and as you can tell by my bubble, I am live from the streets of San Francisco. Anybody who gets that reference, much respect.
And I believe that that's going to be a fine format for our podcast tonight, as tonight we will be doing our podcast in the style of the streets of San Francisco, which is, Steve, I called you Jason. Everybody screws you two up. But we know that the streets of San Francisco is a Quinn Martin production.
There you go.
Get right into it. Prologue. What was the bigger news story of today and why? The freeing of Bill Cosby or the death of Donald Rumsfeld?
I'm going to go with the freeing of Bill Cosby because unless you are really into it, I'm sure there are a lot of people who would say, who the hell is Donald Rumsfeld? Obviously, former defense secretary, actually worked under several administrations. He is if you want to talk about the quote unquote swamp creatures, he is the Loch Ness monster or one of them of swamp creatures. He's definitely of Washington or was. So, but the cause or the con, depending on how you want to look at the fact that he got out of jail. One interesting thing I saw on Twitter was a very, very vigorous cheer, yell, shout, Enzo dance by one Felicia Rashad, former co-star of The Cosby Show. For those of you who don't remember, The Cosby Show played mom in the Creed movies, but she very smartly, I would think, turned off her comments so that nobody could drag her for celebrating the release of Mr. Cosby.
Yeah, it sounded like Felicia got kind of brutalized on social media for coming out and defending the Cods. I'm going to offer the contrasting view and say that the death of Donald Rumsfeld is possibly the larger news story. Not really for reasons of history, because you're probably absolutely right. In terms of what was the more significant headline of the day, it probably is Bill Cosby. But the death of Donald Rumsfeld makes me happy. This is just an individual with no redeeming qualities on any level. I'm not sure he even would tip his garbage man at Christmas. There's nothing I am missing. I mean, Bill Cosby's crimes against women were horrific, and it's a technicality that was that was first manifested by a gentleman who would later become one of Trump's second impeachment attorney lawyers, Bruce Castor, that led eventually to Cosby being released. That's the system bungling. That is trash can kicking, cat slapping sort of stuff. Don Rumsfeld dying, may he be meeting many the service member whose blood is on his hands now. So good riddance, Don. Don't let the door hit you on the way out.
Geez, no love for Rummy, huh?
No, he is nummy. He is fertilizer. All right. Act 1, SROs in Howard County schools. Fact or fiction? After a very close vote by the Howard County Board of Education about 10 days ago, SROs, or student resource officers in Howard County, are continuing for the 2021-2022 school year. This was at the chagrin of many a local activist who had sought for the removal of SROs from Howard County schools. SROs are a frequent target nationwide of the defund the police movement. And going back to the local aspect of this, there was a lot of speculation that given the 2020 election cycle, that the way it turned out, that SROs would be soon to go. Steve, SROs don't seem. I'm not sure your experience, but SROs definitely seem to be a much different animal than they were in the 1980s in Howard County when I went to school when they first started. What do you make of what's going on in our own county of Howard and SROs?
Well, I would agree with you, Bill. When I did not grow up in Howard County, but in the 80s, I was in school in Prince George's County, and we had the equivalent of SROs as well. And nobody really ever paid them any mind unless they were trying to sneak off campus for lunch at the nearby McDonald's and hoping they didn't get caught. So it's really become a big thing. I would say that I'm not surprised that this new board kept SROs because of the change in the elections. I have a sense that there seems to be more of a conservative lean with this board than the previous board, based on who won. Christina Delmont Small being reelected, obviously Dr. Liu in District 5. So I'm actually not surprised that SROs remained at schools. It really has become crazy. If you go on social media, you would think that the National Guard was being deployed at every single school in Howard County. On one side, on the other side, you would think that Howard County is a crime-ridden cesspool. Every school has bars on the windows, and you need armed camp guards to keep the kids under control. So I think both sides have lost their minds, to be quite blunt. I think there could have been a better solution than police officers, maybe community liaisons, counselors, things of that nature. But it really has spun out of control. And let me just say on a side note, while you could argue that they're asking for it because they're getting very political, but our current and former student members of the board, some of the stuff that they're taking, some of the incoming is way out of bounds. Yes, Zach especially has very much gotten very political, but he's still a kid, and some of the stuff that's being said is just way out of bounds right now. It's just getting nuts.
You brought up a number of things, and so let me respond, hopefully in some sort of similar order. SROs in Howard County in the 80s, their worst crime were, catcalling and acting lustily at the nubile high school ladies in the parking lot of Howard High School. So boorish behavior, to be sure. But is it along the lines of what my own kids experienced in Howard County public schools? Both graduates of Oakland Mills, or some of the stories I've heard from close friends of mine, and certainly some of the stories I've read online? No. I also agree with you that, and I'll expand upon a point that you made. I think there is no other aspect of quote unquote defund the police, which I really wish had been called reimagine policing, because that truly is what it asks for, but it doesn't make a hot bumper sticker or a sign. About deploying people who are skilled in law enforcement principles, but also know about mental health, also know about counseling, also know about adolescence. also know about the social structure and culture. It's a shame that we have not found yet better alternatives to this, because I'm not sure that the alternative is exactly a counselor or a mental health professional or, a person who fits into a category that we currently use. I think the solution is found in something that is part all of these things. So it's a shame that we haven't found that solution, and it's especially pathetic that in a county like ours, which pretends itself to be some bastion of enlightenment, that we can't do that. So now that gets me to the third and final point I'll make, which is the discourse and the dialogue. This was a political vote. It was 5-3 in order to maintain the SROs. So the student board member and the two newly elected board members who are in their first term on the board voted in the minority. The perceived two swing votes on the board both needed to vote in favor of removing the SROs for it to happen. And there was no way on God's green earth both of them were going to vote for it. I'm not sure why anybody was surprised about one or the other not voting, because there was one who was pretty certain, the one not to vote for it, and she will maybe be running next year for an at-large board spot, or I think speculation I read in another blog is that she will not be. So somebody who's a lame duck from running for re-election, they can vote however they damn well feel. But the tone and tenor of what goes on is really disgusting. And you've heard me say this with Jason. This place is no better than anywhere else. First off, you get people, and the reason I'm not naming names is so I'm keeping consistent with what I'm going to say about this next person. And I know you know who I'm going to be talking about. The man who I call 4 of 6, because that's where he placed in the primary in District 4 in the primary election in 2020. The little guy from River Hill, ripping on an 18-year-old young man, and then on like his 17-year-old replacement. Really? That's who you are, that you do that. What does that show your special education children, that it's okay to do? It's okay to be a bully. It's okay to, to threaten people. It's okay to, do a little search and say, oh, I know who your employer is, and I'm going to email them and show them the things you're saying. Who are you, you punk? You're a loser.
Yeah.
You're many times over a loser. You will never be half the human being that Zach or Peter are. So it's just sad all the way around, and I wish it would go away, but it won't.
And let me just throw in, I'm sorry to interrupt, but let me just throw in the person, he who shall not be named, talking about, employers and this, that, and the other. This is the same jabroni who's probably throwing rose petals at his TV when they go on Fox News moaning about quote unquote cancel culture. And now you're going after somebody in the same way. Hypocrisy, thy name is, you know who you are.
Well, and we can't say names right now because there's legal action. Still that thing hanging out there with that other former and maybe future District 4 Howard County Council candidate, and 3 people we know. So, until that judge rules, but I hear that might work out fine. But that's just what I'm getting through the grapevine. So yeah, we're not. I mean, we could talk for the rest of the time on this, Steve. But this place is no better than anywhere else, and it's people like our nameless, brainless friend who make it bad for everyone else. Which leads us to Act Two, a way to make things better. State Senator Katie Fry Hester from District 9 mused publicly recently about the possibility of ranked choice voting in the state of Maryland or possibly Howard County. I will note there's no legislation that I know of that's pending either before the county council or the 2022 General Assembly to bring ranked choice voting to the state or county, or any county in Maryland for that matter, though I wouldn't be surprised if it were being considered somewhere where there's a charter government. But it's an interesting question. Of course, Steve, as you know, the largest ranked choice voting experiment is happening in New York City in their mayoral election, which has turned into a little bit of a cluster because I believe about 150,000 test votes were counted in with the regular votes. So now the election officials are doing the digital business of, as my grandmother would say, picking fly shit through pepper, and picking out the fake ballots from the real ones. So who knows when that election's going to get settled? But that notwithstanding, what do you think of this of the concept of ranked choice voting being part of Maryland's elections?
Well, let me say, first of all, the total cluster in New York, it's almost as if New York looked at the Iowa caucuses and said, no, this is how the big boys jack things up. So, NYC is showing you how to really screw the pooch. So, Iowa, hold their beer. That said, ranked choice voting, to me, there seems to be something wrong with the concept where you eventually win an election with the votes of people who wanted 2 or 3 other people to win that election before you're behind. As you know, the ranked choice voting, you go through different rounds. It's like, okay, you're eliminated, so whoever these people's number 2 goes to that. Right? There's just a whole one, as we could see from New York, it's taking too damn long. That's the first problem. But I just don't see where, if I'm gonna throw 4 people on a ballot, that the person who I thought so little of that I threw their name in 4th ultimately would get my vote to get them over the top based on the elimination round. So I am not a fan of ranked choice voting. We can have a whole different discussion about open primaries, which I think is worth a look, but something about ranked choice voting doesn't sit well with me. It just doesn't feel right to me. I get the concept. I know it's been used in places like Maine, I believe, has used it. So I'm just not a fan.
So you and I have both had the opportunity of running and privileged to stand as candidates in public elections, and sadly, both of our experiences turned up unsuccessful. And I could say that in my race, certainly, ranked choice voting would have been a very interesting concept, because given the year that I ran and the district in which I ran and who I ran against, there could have been, if someone had an opportunity to rank their first 2, there could have been an opportunity for a fresh-faced young Democrat to maybe slide into that second slot in a district that had been represented by old, tired, and ugly Republicans for God knows how long. But that wasn't the case. And I do see the advantage of ranked choice voting in that, is that I think it gives the newcomer a shot. It gives the less well-financed candidate a shot. What I thought was fascinating in this election was the tag teaming of some of these candidates, like Garcia and Andrew Yang formed a tag team, whether they were the British Bulldogs or the Rougeau brothers, we have yet to see, has yet to be determined. But but you know, it looks like so far from the returns, if they're to be believed, that they seem to be benefiting Garcia a little bit more. But we'll know what happens there. So, all, you know, and I also remember perennial candidate for school board and 1 point school board member Alan Dyer in Howard County being a huge champion of ranked choice voting. Do I think I have yet to see the ranked choice model that convinces me that it's a thing that Maryland or local politics within the state of Maryland need. I'm not sure what problem it's fixing. Now, some would just say, well, you dumb jerk, you just said what problem it would fix. It would give new people a chance. There are other ways to do that. You know, on the last podcast, I talked about public financing of campaigns. You know, public financing, including access to airwaves, including, you know, robust debate and discussion between candidates. You know, those I think are the avenues. Those I do believe that you do have to get out and work. I'm not sure I believe that if you continually finish third in various rounds of ranked voting, and my understanding is that depending on your system, you know, you may not just have a primary and a general, you may have rounds. That's the best way to elect our representatives. I'm keeping an open mind to it, but I'm not sure, you know, how it would provide better representation. Also, let's talk about another aspect that would provide better representation: redistricting, especially on the congressional level, but you can make the case for General Assembly. And how about this? Single member delegate districts for the House of Delegate campaigns for the House of Delegates in the state.
Well, I would say a couple of things. Redistricting, absolutely. I mean, you know, there are all kinds of names, from the pterodactyl, the brontosaurus, all kinds of names for these districts. I was looking at something on Twitter. You know, one thing I do love about Twitter is the occasional trolling that is ribbing and not rude. But I think Dan Crenshaw did a tweet about elections, and somebody trolled him with a map of his congressional district that pretty much wraps around, I think it's Houston, I forget what city it is. It's you know, it's, let's say it is akin to Maryland Congressional District 3, which, full disclosure, I live in that congressional district.
Me too.
So it's one of those. But redistricting in a logical fashion, absolutely. I think that's long overdue. And I know that some people say, well, you know, I'm not going to do it in my state because another state's not going to do it. I think that's bull. You know, you do you. You know, if Maryland wants to do it the fair and right way, doesn't matter if Texas is all jacked up. Let Texas worry about that later. So, you know, that's one thing I would throw out there. And then single member districts. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the idea that a district like, you know, I'm in 13 that has 3 members of the House of Delegates is just insanity. You don't need 3 people to represent that district. And then you have these little, you know, this whatever the hell 9B is, where there's a single person. It's single member districts make perfect sense. If it's good enough for your state senator, I don't know why it's not good enough for your member of the House of Delegates. I know they're trying to do more of a federal House and Senate model, but no.
Well,
I'm with you on both points.
Well, to wrap up, I mean, the single member districts, I mean, you know, you've been around the block a few times. I mean, single member districts are often created for individuals. I'm thinking of the former delegate George Della in Baltimore County, who is a beneficiary of a single member district. The Mitchell family were beneficiaries of single member districts in Baltimore City. for a long time, as well as having their own considerable political machine. And then here in Howard County with the former county executive who represented us in District 12B, and now, a person who's done a lot of support and a lot of legwork for the state Democratic Party, who was the beneficiary of the redistricting into 9B, although in all fairness, not the first. I do not believe that she was the intended beneficiary of District 9B. I think that there was more of a desire to take the community of Ellicott City and put it into its own district, and I believe that was more of a Governor O'Malley and County Executive Ullman thing going on. But I mean, in all fairness, Steve, I mean, we're both in 13 as well, and I mean, we really only have 2 delegates because one lives in California. So I mean that's kind of a thing, and the other 2 delegates I think we have are both very good, both friends of the podcast. One's been on, the other one I don't know what she's waiting for. She always, that's a long story, but I would say absolutely. I mean, if I look back at let's look at our District 13. I mean, District 13 runs from here in Oakland Mills east over to Jessup, Elk Ridge, and then all the way down south to the end of Howard County to North Laurel, bordering the city of Laurel.
Yep.
Look at District 12, starting out in West Columbia and on the lip of River Hill, through Harper's Choice, cutting through Town Center, going to Long Reach, going through Elk Ridge, and then going into southwestern Baltimore County from Catonsville over to Lansdowne and up to the Baltimore City line. You cannot tell me that either of these cases would not be better with 3 single-member districts. I'll volley it back to you, sir, for a final thought before Act 3.
No, I would say go to Act 3. I think you're absolutely right, and I say this, with the nothing but love for those 2 members of the House of Delegates that you did not mention, but we know who they are, friends of the podcast, and I would hate like heck to lose one of them, but it just makes logical sense to go that route. So
Act 3, in which names are named. So we now focus to Howard County Council District 1, which I mentioned in a recent broadcast of this very podcast. Incumbent council member Liz Walsh, who upset Democratic incumbent John Weinstein to become Howard County one of 5 Howard County freshman council members in 2018, has not announced yet her plans for 2022. Most of the smart money and even a lot of the dumb money is that she'll be running for re-election, but she faces a primary challenger who was already filed in Naveen Kurtam, who we both know, very nice lady. I was on a transition committee with her. I believe chair of your or a member of your board that you have served on in Howard County. What make you of this race, Steve Hunt?
Well, in the name of full disclosure, yes, Naveen Kurtam is somebody who I have served with on the Howard County Board of Appeals. She was actually the chair of the board until about 2 weeks ago, when she resigned from the board to run for office. I consider her a friend, so in case anybody wants to go there, I'm putting it out there now. I think a primary challenge in District 1, you could fall under, thank you, Captain Obvious. I think you, me, Jason, if you were here, we all saw this coming. Let's just be blunt. There's been a lot of dissatisfaction amongst Howard County Democratic Party circles with Ms. Walsh. quite frankly, not even during her term as council member, going back to the election of 18, where she twisted herself in all kinds of knots to not endorse the nominee of the Howard County Democratic Party for county executive, Dr. Calvin Ball. She went on, most notably, another program, as they say in our business. And when asked the question, spent 5 minutes moonwalking her way out of the question to not say, I endorse Calvin Ball versus then County Executive Alan Kittleman, the Republican nominee. So I think that there's been a number of Dems in Howard County who have said, yeah, we would like to take her out. I don't know if it's going to be as easy as some people think it is. I know, yes, she won by 12 votes, I believe, but District 1's a funny animal.
You won the primary by 6.
Okay, I thought they recounted it and she got the 12, but 6.
That was the recount.
Oh, okay.
Well, maybe she won by 12. Anyway, it was a slim margin.
Yes. So I got my numbers backwards, but if you look at a District 1, it's an odd animal, and you look at some of the areas like in Elk Ridge, West Ellicott City. You look at the fact that in the Board of Ed election that we all thought was going to be very close was a blowout to somebody who leans much more the conservative side of the fence. I don't know that Ms. Walsh is going to be as easy an out as some people want or hope or think she will be. Her supporters, they are into Liz Walsh. She may have as passionate a set of supporters as anybody in the county right now. They are, you want to talk about ride or die, they're with it. So I think Ms. Kertom has she's got a task ahead of her, because as you know, Bill, with an incumbent, you have to make a case for two things. One, why should the incumbent be fired? And two, why should they be replaced by you? And it'll be interesting to see what Naveen's case is to prove those 2 points and convince the voters that that should happen. So it's going to be an interesting race, no doubt. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a few other folks jump in that thing.
You raised some interesting points. And so first off, let me apologize if I assume it is indeed Kertom and not Kertum. So apologies to Naveen for that. And certainly we look forward to having both Ms. Kertom and Ms. Walsh on this podcast as the 2022 election draws nearer. But I agree with your assessment that Liz Walsh is going to be a tough out. And I'll tell you why. Council District 1 is very likely overdeveloped. From Elk Ridge to Ellicott City, of course, so much has been made about the development around downtown Ellicott City. And, many of the people there, don't like the fact that there's so much development in Ellicott City and in Elk Ridge. And Councilmember Walsh ran her campaign based on bringing sanity to the zoning process and to the development processes in Howard County, and has wound up being on the wrong side of many a 3-2 vote, which of course, as you know, the 3-2 votes on land use in the Howard County Council completely spin my bottles, because why do we have very liberal council members voting along with the head of the Howard County Trump campaign? It is an incredibly quizzical situation, which I can speculate as to why that is, but I don't really want to be known as a tinfoil hat kind of guy. There's plenty of them already floating around, although they masquerade as sane and sober community commentators. So that's one issue. I should say that's not one issue. The place where I'm going with this is that Northeast Howard is overdeveloped. They vote against development, but of course, so many of these people are residents in that very development. So they knew what they were buying. They bought anyway, and damn it, they hate it. They want to throw somebody out. And so, she does tap into a bit of the electorate that's not feeling like it's getting its value for its money. And those are people who vote. So the case to press against Ms. Walsh's continuance in office becomes to me about as clear as Vaseline. In that I don't know what that angle is. Now, I have heard and seen some of the things that Naveen has put up and has posted, and it seems to indicate something about being inclusive and more diversity. You know, I do not think Ms. Kurtam is a person of color. Is she not? I know she's Jewish, but I don't believe she's a person of color. So I don't know if where she's going to go is that electing her will bring more diversity to the council, or a more of a diverse eye on the council. And I don't know if that's going to be simply a measurement of her assets, or is it also going to be a critique of Ms. Walsh? Now, I actually think it's going to be the latter, because I'm going back a couple years to the election of a zoning board chair and vice chair, or was it a council chair and vice chair? And many people called Ms. Walsh's lack of support for Councilman Jones for this position to be racist. Now, a lot of people heard the comments. A lot of people watched the hearing. I didn't hear anything that was racist. I heard stuff that was insulting. I heard stuff that alluded towards proximity to the development community. I did not hear racism. A lot of other people did. But if that winds up becoming the hook on which the campaign to unseat Councilmember Walsh is hung on, I think that's a mistake.
Yeah, I think it's a big mistake. And what I will say as far as that election was, I did not see race either. I did see smoke and mirrors, and I'll just call her out on the part of Ms. Walsh. She, I believe, viewed the chairmanship of Dr. Jones to be one that would be too developer friendly. She just didn't want him in that position. But instead of some BS about, an attorney needs to be the chair and this, and drop the crap, be honest, and just say, I think you're to be too cozy with the development community, and I don't want you to be the chair of the board. I think she and also Councilwoman Young, they, like I said, they tried to hide what they were really feeling behind some technicality and quite frankly, things like you need to be an attorney, which are just not true on the council and never have been. We have had people, not attorneys, chair the zoning board, period, hard stop. So it was smoke and mirrors, but it was not racial. That said, as far as Ms. Walsh, I will say that to this point, while I disagree with her on a lot of issues, I think she has been, as a council member, in line with the feelings of the people of District 1, based on what I know about that district and the people who I talk to up there. And that's where I say she's going to be a hard out, because if she were running in any other district, yeah, she'd have a problem. But the way she's going about her business, I think it puts her in a very good position in that district.
Yeah, I mean, and to put a bow on the council, the internal council election thing, and Dr. Jones, he's a PhD mathematician. He can figure it out. And yes, to say that a lawyer has to serve as a chair of that committee, or as a chair of that board, is an insult to myself, yourself, a very smart person who we both know, who are very active in Howard County civic affairs, who would be very well qualified to be on the county council, who would be very well qualified to be on the zoning board, who do not happen to be attorneys. So that was trash. And I agree with you 110%. It's something, frankly, which is why I think this council is almost near dysfunctional. They fail, and all of them fail to call out the elephant in the room. They fail to talk about it. And what it gives rise to is some of this rump component, and I use the term rump with intention, that we see, who are throwing up conspiracy, who truly are tin hatters, who are throwing up conspiracy theories around every corner, and with every petition to build some housing. And God forbid, some of it may even be for people who make less than $100,000 a year. It gives oxygen to that nonsense. So frankly, shame on our entire county council for not calling the trash out. And for not getting this development situation and getting this influence of a small number of developments, engineers, and development attorneys under control. So to that respect, I grant your points, and I'm sensitive to your experiences, and that in some respects, council members Walsh and Young, call out the expertise of our smart citizens such as yourself and others who have served on these citizen boards. But I guess my frustration, and maybe how I'm more okay with this, is because no one else seems to be presenting any sort of a reasoned opposition. There's either rubber stamping, or there is throwing up the bulldozers are coming to mow down the trees. There's no reasoned other ground.
Yeah, no, and I absolutely agree. And this council has been, I try to give them a break because they've had to serve in the middle of a global pandemic, and certainly, nobody saw that coming. But it is my hope that somehow, some way, whether it's with and I'll say for them, I'll leave Council Member Youngman out of this because he is just starring in the role of the lone Republican here. It really is, how do the Democrats play in the sandbox? I hope the four of them get their act together. I don't know if it's somebody has to sit them down in a room and figure it out, but right now, not a lot's getting done, and there's certainly much more fighting than there is legislating. And when they do legislate, it's kicking and screaming. So, maybe if they all get reelected and they get a little more comfortable in their collective skins, that they can figure it out. Because, no disrespect to our council member from District 5, but when he over and over again is looking like the adult in the room, you got a problem.
This is true. This is very true. Let us then go to Act 4. And Act 4.
I'm loving this Streets of San Francisco theme.
Well, we're almost done. We're almost done. This is the last act, but as you know, there's always one more segment. So, sure. And I'm ready for it. I got it. I got it right up in here, Steve Hunt. So Act 4. Who shall hold the crown? I don't know. I just came up with it. Steve, I know you wanted to talk some Maryland governor's race. In the last Fine podcast episode, I gave my top 10 as to who the prime candidates are, who the faces to watch are, not really who's rising or falling. That's going to happen later. But what the day, I obviously had impact, and I'll tell you why. Because the next day after that Fine podcast production went into the media, went into the inner tubes, Tom Perez announced for governor. So obviously he was waiting to see if he would make the Forward Maryland top 10, the initial edition. He did. And I believe that tilted his decision from go, no go to definite go. So what do you make of this cavalcade of stars who are lining up at the starting gate to run the race of their lifetime?
Well, I will say this, and I always say this with all due respect to anybody who runs, because if you're getting in the ring, nothing but respect for you. But my first thought of three, we'll just say, is I think we have a much stronger field on the Democratic side in 2022 than we did in 2018, which should not be a surprise because it is an open seat. And so those who, would be hesitant to run against an incumbent governor, especially one who was at the popularity level of one Lawrence Hogan, obviously Francho is not going to run against Hogan, right? So that's a natural occurrence of things. I still say the leader in the clubhouse, if there was one, would still have to be Comptroller Francho. He's got the money, he's got the name recognition. He's got the network and the infrastructure necessary to make a big run. I still think that he is, I don't think he is as solid a front runner as one might think. I think about and you mentioned this on the last podcast, Doug Gansler trying to take the same route as Peter Francho. I see Gansler almost making a play of, if you want Francho, but in the form of somebody who's not cozied up to Larry Hogan for 8 years, I'm your man. I see him almost making a play like that. And I would not be surprised if John Delaney doesn't join the race and try to run in the same lane at some point. He obviously has executive aspirations, ran for president, doesn't really have anything to do right now. So I've not seen him say he's not running. So, that's a name out there. My second point, speaking of names that are not out there, you made a very interesting point, you and Jason, both about the lack of women running. And it's not for lack of talent. We have a county executive in Prince George's County. We have a county executive in Frederick County. We have the Speaker of the House of Delegates. We have some rising stars in Howard County that you all mentioned. A name that I'm going to throw out there on the Democratic side, how about Donna Edwards? Former member of Congress, has a national profile, work on NBC/MSNBC. Maybe she looks at it. I don't know. Maybe she already has and said, eh. So I would be shocked if our friends at Emerge didn't, kind of put some wind beneath the wings of somebody to get in this thing. And then my third point is, and you guys talked about the Republicans, they have done a very interesting job of consolidating on the mainstream lane very quickly. If you think about it, it was almost a rapid fire of Rutherford's not running. Schultz is running for governor. Glassman, who a lot of people had running for governor, is now running for comptroller. They've lined their stuff up and are trying to consolidate behind Schultz. As a matter of fact, I was reading a tweet, and Kathy Zalega, probably going to pronounce that horribly.
Lega, yeah, Zalega.
Somebody who might run, or you might have thought would run, she's behind Schultz. So there is a consolidation. I still think, and you're right, we have this one individual running out of the Trump lane. I wouldn't be surprised to see one or two others, because the Trump lane their presence will be felt on the Republican side in the primary. But Schultz seems to have a pretty easy glide path to the nomination. So those are my three thoughts. On the Democratic side, since there's more than one candidate, I say Francho. One candidate that really interests me is Wes Moore. Has a profile, has a constituency, has a platform. I don't know that we may have a situation where he and John King cancel each other out. That there seems to be a little bit of kind of in the same lane there. So, and then Rashawn Baker is one that's interesting. Obviously, he's got a case from Prince George's County, former county executive. Clearly, Angela Alsobrooks is not running, so he has access to that Prince George's County, suburban Maryland money and voter base. But what is his case this time around that's going to be stronger than the one he made in 2018 when he, quite frankly, lost to Ben Jealous? So it's going to be interesting to see how this thing develops. Looking forward to seeing who starts to really resonate.
I'll be fairly brief on this because I've spoken a lot about this already. But to coin a to coin a phrase, I mean, Peter Franchot right now is appearing to the voters as 160 pounds of twisted steel and sex appeal. But is he inevitable? No, he's not. And I think you bring up a very astute point about how Doug Gansler is going to position himself, which is very curious, since of course working very closely and very at a very high level on Doug's campaign is Peter Franchot's former chief of staff. So one would say that if anybody knows how to beat Peter Franchot, is aware of his weaknesses and shortcomings, it would be that man. So this is quite a curious turn of events. Despite some chortling on social media, I think people have kind of forgotten about the Red Cup, incident at the party at the beach. And you know what, frankly, given what we've seen in politics in the state and country in the last 8 years, who gives a damn? Just really a nothing burger at this point. Very interesting thought about John Delaney. I thought he was still traumatized from that horrific slide ride he took at the Iowa State Fair in 2017. Where he looked like this all the way down the slide. but first one in to run for president, maybe last one in to run for governor, who knows? I could see it. On the Republican side, you're right about the Schultz candidacy, and that one seems to be much more inevitable. Although I still think a Michael Steele could flub stuff up. I do wonder, though, about somebody coming in from the right flank. Somebody, who, understanding that the Hogan machinery, Kathy Zallega being a prime example of that, Barry Glassman being another, are right behind Schultz, that there's not somebody who comes in like a crazy man and takes up that mantle. Name I'm thinking of probably would not do it, but Dan Cox, the January 6th attending delegate from Frederick County, who
I thought I saw something where he filed papers. Maybe he may have filed papers.
Well, he needs to show his papers because man's kind of a mongrel. Another one is Michael Perutka, the former Anne Arundel County Council member who was once, and I believe may still be, a member of the Southern Party, which is not recognized in the state of Maryland. But Steve, you could imagine what the Southern Party would be about. It's not about it's not about it's not really about anything that either of us believe in. It's about, the war of northern aggression, and it was about property rights and all that stuff. So those are two names of people who I could see who just swing out into the far right lane and try to scoop up as many Trump crazies as they can, and perhaps provide an opportunity for a more moderate person like a Michael Steele to get in there.
I'm going to give you a name too, since we're throwing names out there who may run in the Trump lane. And an old friend of the shows, based on our lovely commentary during the elections, one Kimberly Klacik.
Oh,
how about somebody who already had, who has already had hands laid on her by Donald J. Trump himself, who raised a butt ton of money in short order. Yes, she's already declared she's going to run in a rematch against Kwesi and Fume. But if somebody says, hey, you can go back to Baltimore and get your doors blown off again, or you could be like one of the stars of the still not canceled Trump show.
I hope nobody affiliated with that person watches or listens to this podcast. because that is more than plausible. That is absurdly plausible. I actually thought you were going to mention another former candidate, and in fact, I believe a Republican nominee for District 7 Congress, for initials FM. But I believe that person moved, right? I believe that person's no longer in the state of Maryland.
Yes. The last I heard, I'm thinking Florida. Yeah, they're not. Yeah, I think they're not around these parts anymore.
Yeah. Also, on a serious note, wasn't there a? I mean, I don't want to. I guess I am speaking about it openly. I'm just about ready to put this on the internet. Wasn't there a health concern with Ms. Edwards, and that's why she declined to run for re-election to the House?
Not sure. Not sure.
Okay. I thought there was perhaps multiple sclerosis or something that was announced or disclosed. But that
not sure.
That would definitely I mean, she did wind up running for Senate against in the primary against Chris Van Hollen, so who knows. Epilogue. Steve, question for you.
Yes, sir.
In tonight's episode, are you Michael Douglas or Carl Malden?
Well, seeing as that I'm the new kid to the podcast, I would have to say Michael Douglas, only because of my status as it relates to the show, and nothing else.
Well, I believe with this profile, I have to weigh in as the Carl Malden. So that was a very natural flow of events there.
Yeah. Where's the Amex card?
Oh, that's a long story. A long story. But I leave home with that one on a daily basis, I got to admit. Steve, thank you for joining us on tonight's podcast production. I hope you'll consider doing this again.
Oh, absolutely. This has been a blast. And again, the Streets of San Francisco theme, hopefully we're not the only two people who, got that, or if you didn't, go on YouTube or wherever and catch an old episode. It actually was a really good show.
I believe we shall be congratulated for our irreverence. And hopefully we'll have people running for office in Howard County who will still want to appear on this podcast after tonight.
Yeah, we hope so.
I don't think we did much.
Come on, guys.
We didn't go wrong. We do what we do. So anyway, thank you, listening and viewing public, for listening and or viewing this edition of Forward Maryland. For Steve Hunt, my name's Bill Woodcock, and we'll be coming at you soon with fresh, hot, piping content.
Good night,
take care, everybody. Have a good night. Bye now.